Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Regal Podcast with me, Jordan Lewis, and Harry Cutress. Today, we're going to be listening to a rant that Harry has about the different types of males/personalities and why he believes that they're stupid for different reasons anyway. So, Harry, to get started off, what the hell are you talking about? What do you mean there are different types of males or different types of personalities? What are you talking about?
Right. So a lot of people listening to this will have heard the term alpha, beta, gamma, omega, zeta, all like 14,000 terms that people make up these days. I hear about them so fucking often, and I have my clients bring them up to me all the time, and I see other coaches out there doing a similar thing to me, quoting this like basic bollocks, bullshit, faux science. So I just want to very clearly kind of sort all this out. It came up on the Joe Rogan podcast like 2 years ago, where a guy was on it. I think his name was Adam something, and he was trying to talk about how alpha males don't exist and all this kind of stuff. And there was a lot of backlash about what alphas do, yada yada. So I just want to clear all this up because it's really starting to fuck me off. There will be explicit language if you haven't noticed.
Don't worry, we'll put that tag on the episode. So just to get started then, what is an alpha, what is a beta, what is an omega and a gamma and everything else that we've just talked about?
Right, so I'll start off giving you the explanations that this bollocks science gives you, and then I'll relate it to animals, and then I'll explain why in human cases it doesn't work. So apparently there are 7 types, or the research I did into this kind of pseudoscience says there are 7 types. The top of the food chain, you've got alpha males. So these are your strong, confident, very grounded. They're your leaders. This is the person who makes the decisions. They're the highest status person. They make all the decisions. So that makes sense when you think of, say, wolves. You've got one alpha. That wolf is in charge. It's probably the biggest, strongest, toughest, meanest wolf. They make the decisions. Nobody questions it. That's how it works. Underneath that, you've got your beta. This is kind of your subordinate. And for the purpose of this, I'm just going to talk about men. Women do have hierarchies. Obviously, women have hierarchies that's very, very similar and mirror this in many ways. But there are very kind of slight but important distinctions and differences. So I'm going to kind of leave that to one side for a different video. So betas are your subordinate males. These are the guys who want to be an alpha, but they don't have the status to be able to do so, whether because they're physically weak or they're too selfish and the rest of the group doesn't respect them, or kind of there's a million reasons for it. But these are the people who are kind of, they're looking to become powerful, they're looking to be the leader, but they're not there yet. Think of you kind of your number 2s, your number 3s who don't have the respect of the mob, but instead are kind of in a position of power because the leader has chosen them. Think somebody like a Dwight Schrute from The Office US. Next, you've got deltas. These are the vast majority of people, the vast majority of any kind of hierarchy. They're seen as kind of your NPCs, so which is your non-player characters in video game speak. They're kind of the cogs in the machine. These are people who just kind of turn up, do as they're told, go home, and they're happy with that. They don't want any positions of power. They don't care about moving up or down the hierarchy. They're just happy living their lives, and they're happy with somebody else making the decision, so they don't have to deal with the kind of the stress of having to make decisions for themselves. These are the vast majority of people. Next, you're moving on to Sigma males. Now, apparently Sigma males are people like your Tom Hardy or your John Wick. These are people who are kind of, they could be an alpha by every kind of definitive thing you look at. They have charisma, and they're strong, and they're confident and powerful, and they're competent, they can get things done, but they just remove themselves kind of from the society. So these are people who don't want to be in charge. They don't even want to be around people. They're introverted. They're just kind of, look, you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. I don't want to be a part of this hierarchy. That said, they can and often do partner up with hierarchies in order to achieve their goals. So to use the John Wick example, it's a case of, yeah, he's introverted. He just wants to live alone with his dog. However, when he needs to take down the bad guys, he will go to the hotel and he'll call in favors, and he'll like help get other people to provide him with weapons, and he'll team up with people, etc. Next, you're looking at omegas. Omegas are the lowest rung of any hierarchy, to the point they're actually excluded from the hierarchy. So in this case, think of, if we look at a wolf pack again, this is a wolf that is either so lazy or incompetent or has such bad BO or whatever it might be, that the wolf pack basically says, go fuck yourself, go away, we don't want you. So there's that big distinction there between a lone wolf being a sigma who chooses to remove themselves from the hierarchy, and omegas who are forcibly kicked out of it. Then you've got gammas. Gammas are seen as kind of, apparently they're your nerd archetypes. These are the people who are super smart and they're experts in their field. However, they just don't have the social or the physical skills to be respected as a leader. So it might be we're talking about kind of like a Sheldon Cooper type character, or who he isn't going to be a social alpha when other people are around. He's not particularly going to be that leader type. However, he is such an expert that he kind of gets that respect from people because he's a genius. However, nobody really likes being around him. Nobody wants to be around him because of his social faux pas and his lack of kind of empathy and emotional understanding. And the fact he always puts himself or logic first, he doesn't put the group first, which is something that alphas famously kind of have to do in order to keep control. And then finally, you have with zeta males. Zeta males are another lone wolf type character, but these are a lot more kind of described as kind of evil, which I don't think is fair, but they're kind of more nepotistic. So these are the people who go, well, the hierarchy is stupid. All hierarchies are stupid. So kind of fuck it. Let's just burn down the entire hierarchy. Let's just give up on everything. Here you're looking at somebody like the Joker from Batman. Somebody who goes, yeah, there are these rules and there are regulations and there's this hierarchy, but it's all a load of bollocks. Let's just burn everything down and just start again. Let's just cause chaos for the sake of it. And you see this kind of mindset becoming increasingly common these days. So that's a rough breakdown of the pseudoscience of the archetypes of men in society. Now, like I said, it works when we talk about animals. It makes sense with animals that we talk, like, say, if we keep using this wolf example, you do have to have a wolf that's going to be a shot caller. That wolf is going to be based on size, strength, power, etc. It's going to be the chosen alpha. And they have rituals and combat, etc., in order to decide who the alpha is. That makes sense. The beta is going to be kind of the ones who lose in combat but don't die, who want to be alpha but don't quite have the power to do so. Your deltas are going to be the rest of the group who kind of are just saying, I don't even want to be alpha. I don't care about this. Life's pretty good because I'm getting fed. I'm safe. I'm getting fed. I'm getting water. My needs taken care of. So I'm not fussed about the ambition of it. Your sigmas, I don't know enough about specific wolf social dynamics to know the concept of lone wolves. However, that would be the kind of wolf that lives by themselves, hunts by themselves, has their own den. But if there's a big animal, say that, for example, there's some big elk nearby or a bear, they will work with another pack in order to help kind of take down these larger prey or this larger game. Omegas would be a wolf that's kicked out of the pack. They're the kind of run to the litter types. They're the ones who, for whatever reason, just the pack wants nothing to do with. They're kind of ostracized from the hierarchy. I don't understand how you can have zetas within a wolf pack. I don't understand how there can be a wolf that decides to remove itself from the society and goes, now let's all burn everything down because of nihilism. Because, sorry, I said earlier, I said nepotism. I meant nihilism. I don't understand if wolves are capable of nihilistic philosophical thought. My guess is they don't have the brain capacity for it, but I could be wrong. So yeah, apparently that's how humans shape up in society, and we all need to identify what we are and maximize our skill sets as a result. And it's bollocks. Total.
Why'd you say it's
fucking
bollocks?
Well, it's bollocks because of this. When we look at the wolf example, it makes sense because you have a pack of wolves. That is their hierarchy. That is their society. For example, say you've got 20 wolves, you've got one alpha, you've got maybe two betas, and the rest are all going to be, or you've got a beta and the rest are all going to be deltas. That makes sense because that is the life of a wolf. That is their social circle. Humans don't have that. Humans are in 450,000 hierarchies at the same time. You're in the hierarchy of your family, the hierarchy at work or at school. Even within school, there's going to be some lessons in which you're more confident and more charismatic and you can be the leader in, and other aspects of school that you're not going to be. At work, the same thing. Outside of work, you've got the hierarchy of general open society of your city, the hierarchy of the general open society of your country, the hierarchy of the world, especially now with internet and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all these things. We're in 400 different hierarchies. So take you, for example, Jordan. You're at university, so you're in a certain hierarchy within your friendship group at uni. You're in a different hierarchy, which is your class at uni. You're in a different hierarchy, which is the entirety of that university. So you've got the people who you're friends with, your specific subject, the entirety of the university itself. On top of that, you've got the entirety of the people in that city, which is going to be broken down to people in this bar at a given time, people at this restaurant at a given time, etc. The hierarchy is constant. You're in a new hierarchy pretty much every time you go. You're in the hierarchy at work because you've got your own business and your own employees. You're in the hierarchy of business owners because there are other business owners out there and they can work out a rough hierarchy. You're in a hierarchy of YouTube content creators. You're in the hierarchy with me because we're doing this podcast together. You're in the hierarchy every time there's a new guest, because that guest could be more charismatic and a better leader than you and I, and therefore they could become maybe alpha. There's thousands of them. There are new hierarchies formed all the time, and people in human societies are constantly going in and out of different hierarchies and joining new and different social circles. So the concept of having it fixed like that, of saying somebody is an alpha, doesn't make sense. For example, if you took who you can give me one, who do you think is a great example of what people would call a classic alpha male? It can be anybody.
Well, I was about to say, like, surely there are some people who just categorically are an alpha in almost every situation, if not every situation. I was thinking like Dwayne Johnson, for example. The Rock is categorically alpha, surely.
Mm-hmm. So Dwayne Johnson is a really good example. I think everybody would agree pretty much that if we had to say there is an alpha male in the world, it would probably be somebody like Dwayne Johnson. And that's because physical size, super charismatic. He's got a proven track record of success. So he's clearly competent. He's a very generous guy, good looking. He ticks all these kind of boxes. But to be alpha, that means you have to be the leader. That means you have to be the top of this hierarchy. And that means you have to be the most respected person in the room. There are certain domains that Dwayne Johnson could be in where that's not going to be the case. Whether it's he's talking to his, let's say he goes to a summit. Let's say kind of like how you and I do, where we go to business summits and we meet other entrepreneurs. If he's talking about that he's got this business on the side that he's investing into and it's doing really well, and Warren Buffett happens to be in the same room, and he's having a conversation with Warren Buffett about investments, he's not going to be the alpha in that room because Warren Buffett has a better track record, more competency, more expertise in that field. So in that scenario, everybody's looking to Warren Buffett to take charge and decide where the investments are going to go, rather than say Dwayne Johnson. Equally, Dwayne Johnson, obviously phenomenal athlete, really tough guy, wrestler, former Canadian professional football player, all these kind of great attributes to him. However, if he was, say, him and Mike Tyson were in a room and the conversation was about boxing, or if they were in a room and somebody broke in and tried to attack them, maybe somebody like a Mike Tyson or a Jocko Willink, for example, somebody who's got like maybe a Navy SEAL or an SAS trained fighter, somebody from Mossad or Green Beret or anything like this, one of those people would be the alpha because they have more repetitions in that specific environment, which is there's violence going on, here's what we do. If a gunshot went off and I was at dinner with Dwayne Johnson on this side and a former Navy SEAL or former SASman or SBS or any of these kind of elite combat units on one side, I'm not asking Dwayne Johnson what to do. I'm not looking to him for help. I'm looking to the soldier for help. So this is kind of the point I mean, which is there's 1,000 different hierarchies, and who the leader is. Yes, there are going to be universal traits that mean you're most likely going to be the alpha across multiple domains. But depending on the specific needs of any given situation, the alpha can change at any given moment. So that's kind of where my rant is, because it just dissolves under a tiny bit of kind of pressure.
So obviously, like you just kind of said, it changes depending on the situation. And one thing you kind of mentioned is, for example, Dwayne Johnson at a summit, speaking to Warren Buffett about business specifically, you would look to Warren Buffett as the alpha in that situation. So does that mean, to your understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like expertise in a given situation actually comes over charisma and social skills in most situations?
In most situations, yes. I want to be clear when I say this. Hierarchies are not perfect. So there are going to be kind of outliers, people who, for in some way or other, able to either fake their way to the top or fake their way higher than they should be, or through nepotism or whatever it may be, kind of almost maybe say cheat their way to the top. Or there'll be people who invest $500 and get really, really fucking lucky and make 200 million after like 5 years. In this case of, oh, this person's the expert. In reality, it was they were high and they clicked a button and it went really well for them. I don't know. Maybe say somebody who did that with Bitcoin, for example, 10 years ago. I'm sure there are examples. So yes, to an extent. Now, the reason I'll use Dwayne Johnson and Warren Buffett as this example. Dwayne Johnson will be the alpha in far more situations than Warren Buffett will be. Because roughly speaking, for an alpha, we look for high status people, which means we're looking for somebody who's relaxed under pressure, somebody who's confident, somebody who looks strong and assertive, someone who's willing to make decisions, and somebody who is competent in that situation. We are looking for those 5 things, roughly. There might be a few more, but they're the main 5. If you have a situation where it's a very specific question, and you need a very specific leader to tackle a very specific problem, you will turn kind of to the person who exhibits the best brand of those 5. Now, there will be different weightings and different people will have different weightings individually. However, say there's, for example, say my business, say there's a financial issue and I need to turn to somebody for advice. You're going to turn to somebody who you perceive to have the most expertise. However, the person who you perceive to be the greatest expert is probably the person who, when they talk about the issue, comes across as relaxed and confident and at ease and emotionally grounded, and etc. So if you don't have the social skills, it's difficult for people to even notice long enough for you to even prove your competence. So it all does matter. And being, I don't know what Dwayne Johnson is, but 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", probably 250 plus pounds, being a giant human being who's like with an ungodly work ethic in the gym, that is going to be incredibly helpful in proving in people assuming you're an alpha male and taking you seriously. But that would all fall apart because you and I both know somebody, and I'm thinking of one of your friends in particular, somebody who's very, very large, very, very muscular, very, very kind of dominating, powerful presence. But after like 3 minutes with the person, you can see that they're constantly fidgeting. They're always kind of, and their eyes are darting around. If somebody walks into the room, they're immediately looking at them. And they kind of look a bit like a deer almost, in the sense they're constantly scanning around looking for danger. And that's not who you want to lead you, because you don't want kind of somebody who's emotionally on edge to make the decisions. You want the person who exudes this aura of, don't worry, you don't have to freak out by what's just happened, because I'm not freaking out, and I'm not freaking out because I know I can deal with it. So don't worry about it. Just leave it alone. That's the kind of person people are drawn to. And that implies you don't have to freak out. Say, for example, gunshot goes off and there's an SAS person next to me. I'm instinctively, and this is a cross-cultural, this is just a human behavior, you instinctively look to who you think the alpha is in that situation when a new sudden stimuli occurs. If a gunshot goes off and there's a former SAS soldier behind me, I'll look at him. If he panics, I'm going to start panicking, because he's the person with the competence. And if he is freaking out by the stimuli, then I definitely need to freak out because I don't have the competence that he has. However, if he's stood there totally calm, barely even reacts to it, let's say he's still kind of half asleep and he's just looking at his phone, or let's say he's reading a book and he doesn't even look up, then that automatically makes me more reassured, because it's implying I don't have to react to it, because whatever the situation is, I can deal with it. That implies competence, even if I don't specifically know the person's track record.
Right, okay, that makes sense. What about though? Because, for example, you've got, let's use Dwayne Johnson, let's stay on this example. You have Dwayne Johnson, and there's some sort of problem relating to business specifically, would he not still be the alpha, even if he was in a room with like Warren Buffett and Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, for example? If he was in a room with those, would he not still be the alpha if he's the person coming to them for their expertise and drawing on their expertise, and he's almost the nucleus, the center point of the operation, and he's just drawing from their expertise? Like, they wouldn't automatically become the alpha.
This is where this is kind of proving my point when I talk about how alphas with humans don't work the same way it does with animals. So in that scenario, I'm going to use alpha. Essentially, you can use alpha to mean the same thing as leader. So the alpha in humans is whoever is currently making the decisions, whoever's currently being decisive and deciding this is what we're going to do. So in that scenario, if you say that Dwayne Johnson calls up these 5 experts, and you've got Bill Gates and Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and Buffett and Jack Dorsey and all these different kind of CEOs and geniuses in their field. Elon Musk's there as well. Dwayne Johnson would be the leader because he's the one who's brought all these people together. However, if, say, for example, they all went in and started a business together and they all have this equal share, and he'll probably be the leader because he's the one who exudes the most confidence and the most charisma, for example. Maybe he won't be. Maybe they'll pick somebody with a more proven track record. I don't know. We're talking hypothetically here. If there was a question of stock market investment, people would naturally turn to hear what Warren Buffett had to say because he's got the most experience in that field. If this company was going down whichever avenue, will determine whatever the specific problem they're trying to solve, will determine who the alpha will be. Now, in this scenario, it will probably be a case whereby people will have conflicting opinions and different people have different levels of expertise across the various fields within the similar problem. So I would assume that Dwayne Johnson would be alpha in the sense of whichever person he backs, the group will then agree and they'll back him as well, because he has the influence and the persuasion and the charisma to kind of draw people on side. So it will ultimately be seen as him making the decision. So he will be the leader. But equally, the argument could be that in that situation, the alpha would be whoever Dwayne Johnson turns to make the decision for him. So it depends on how you're looking at decision making. Is the decision made by the person who puts forward the idea, or is the decision made by the person who says, shut up everyone else, we're taking this idea and running with it? And this is where people kind of get this misunderstanding when it comes to alphas and betas, etc. Yes, you're going to have, say, somebody like Dwayne Johnson. There will be a vast majority of situations where he will be the shot caller. And if he says, right, guys, we're going left, that's the end of it. We're going left. People are going to agree. They're not going to argue. People are going to go left. So he is going to be alpha in a lot of situations. There will be, however, other situations where Dwayne Johnson says, right, we're going left. And somebody else says, no, that's stupid. We're going right. They'll probably use different words and the group will go right. And in that scenario, and it could be down to competence, charisma, whatever it may be, in that scenario, the alpha isn't Dwayne. It is the person who people look to be the leader, to make the decision and to follow. And that's kind of what I mean when I say that there's so much interplay and interchange. And in any given scenario that you can give me, in any hypothetical, we could argue it both ways, and there's a million, but if this happened this, and if this happened this, and it depends on this. But roughly speaking, the point is nobody is alpha all the time. No, very few people are probably a beta all the time. There are very, very few people who are probably deltas all the time. I don't think that these groups and these terms kind of apply accurately, because I think everybody kind of, because of human society and because of the broadness of the hierarchies that we're in, they fluctuate between different positions at different places. For example, I know lots and lots of business owners. I know lots and lots of people from school or just people I've met who have their own businesses. They are the shot caller at work. They make all the decisions, and what they say is final. What they say goes. They are the alpha at work, undisputed. However, they go home, and in most of their cases, their partner makes all the decisions and they make no decisions whatsoever. They get home, the food is cooked, that's what they're having. They don't get a decision in that. If they don't like it, tough. What furniture they have, decided by their partner. Where they live, decided by the partner. Almost all these big domestic decisions are made by their partner. And this is not me going down a misogynistic route of me saying that men are alphas because they work and women are alphas at home. I'm not saying that. I specifically use partner because in some of these cases, I'm talking about gay men, and in some of these cases, I'm actually talking about lesbians. In some of these cases, I'm talking about the woman works and the stay-at-home husband. But the point I'm making is somebody can be an alpha at work and be the beta at home. Somebody can be vice versa, obviously. And there are some people who are the alpha with their friendship group because they're the leader of their friendship group. They're the person who goes, guys, what should we do tonight? Oh, I've got an idea. Let's go here. And they lead people out. Then they get to work and they just get told what to do all day and they just accept it. Then there'll be times where, for example, maybe they're at home and they wish they had more of a say, but they don't quite have the ability to negotiate it properly. And it always fluctuates depending on who's around, what mood you're in. That's going to affect your confidence, your body language, etc. So there's all these factors in humans that don't apply to other animals, therefore making generalized labels like alpha, beta, omega, zeta, etc. It just makes it really awkward and difficult. And I think there's so many exceptions that we might as well just give up with the system as using it accurately like that. That said, there is something I do think that's beneficial to it, which is if you can correlate certain traits that we look at as being alpha traits and certain traits that we look at as being beta traits, we can sit down and make, again, not perfect, there will be exceptions, but generalized rules of this is what an alpha kind of personality is. Therefore, for somebody who's out there who wants to be a bit more assertive, who wants to, just plug my own book again, become the king of their own life, Mindset of Kings, available on Amazon. If they're the kind of person who wants to learn those skills, what you can do is identify leaders, alphas, identify the kind of traits they often have in common, and work on those specific skills. Now, certain things can't be worked on. Your height, it does have an impact. Statistically, most CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are over 6 feet tall, which is 2 inches taller than the average person in the UK at least. However, at the same exact time, there are lots of things that can be worked on. Your confidence, your emotional stability, your tonality, the speed in which you speak, whether you speed up and slow down, whether you're constantly really talking really quickly because you're nervous and you get really worried and you just keep talking and talking and you're hoping to try and get through everything you're saying so people stop looking at you, or whether you're kind of relaxed and able to have the camera, the spotlight, the audience, whoever, their attention on you. It's one of these things that a lot of this can be learned. And a lot of this is really useful to say, for example, James Bond and Dwayne Johnson, both alpha males, here's certain behaviors they have in common. It's this, it's this. Let's combine them. What I don't think is helpful is when people decide to tie their own ego to certain behaviors. So if you're tying yourself going, I am an alpha, well, that all in my head, all that does is you're binding your legs together. You're screwing yourself over because you're not allowing yourself the ability to say, this person is better than me or more competent than me or this is their area of expertise. So I am going to sit back. I am going to shut up. I am going to listen. I am going to learn from them. And I'm going to become a better person as a result, as opposed to being the kind of person who is, well, I'm the alpha, so I'll fucking tell you what the answer is. You're wrong, actually. Yeah, I know this is a legal question and you have a law degree and I don't know anything about it, but it is my opinion anyway. You don't want to be that person who's not learning anything. And equally, if you're the kind of person who has to assert the fact that you are an alpha by stating it, I find that dangerous because chances are the fact you have to tell people you're alpha means you're probably not. Because if you were an alpha, you wouldn't have to say it. People just know it. Because if you are the leader of a room, you're the leader of the room. You don't have to tell people you're the leader because you prove it by acting. If you watch Community, for example, Jeff Winger, the main character, one of the 7 main characters in that show, he at no point declares himself the leader of the room. People naturally just flock to him and follow him and look to him to solve problems and look to him to lead. At no point does he have to assert that he's the leader of the group. He just is. And this is kind of where I have this issue, which is I look at the comments and I look at DMs I get and comments I've had on TikToks that we need to discuss this, by the way, because TikTok, you might be watching this. Stop deleting all my content. Like, stop taking everything down. And YouTube, you're the same. You keep deleting my videos. Anyway, sorry, random tangent. I had no idea where that came from. So to all the people kind of out there who get offended when people just say that alphas and betas don't exist, etc., they don't exist in the way that we use the word scientifically to discuss animals. There are examples of alpha behavior in humans. There are examples of beta behavior in humans. But the important thing is to not get so caught up with this label that it affects you negatively. If you feel more confident by telling yourself in the morning, I am an alpha, and doing like affirmations in the mirror, that's great. But you shouldn't be using alpha as the affirmation. You should instead be talking about what it is that you perceive makes you the alpha. I am confident, I am decisive, I am strong, I put the group first. Those kind of things are things you could absolutely and should absolutely be proud of. But just kind of going, I'm an alpha. Why? Because I'm 6'5", 250, and I'm a massive bloke, and I'm good looking, and I've got the beard, therefore I'm an alpha. It's like, no, mate, that doesn't make you an alpha. Because if some guy who's 5'10" and 200 pounds or 195 pounds walks in, and I'm far more self-assured, far more confident, I'm putting other people's interests, taking them into account when I make a decision, and I'm a lot more fun, and I offer a lot more value to the group, I'm just going to take the group from you. And that's absolutely the case. We see that all the time. If you look at human history, it's not the biggest, strongest tyrant that becomes king, because they do become king. Scar becomes king through manipulation, and in The Lion King, he kills Mufasa and frames Simba and all this stuff. But everybody turns on him at the end because nobody wants a leader who's a dick. We see the same thing in military dictatorships. Yes, they work, and yes, military dictatorships happen all the time. But if we look at the Arab Spring, if we look at the British Civil War, if we look at the American War of Independence, the people do get to a point where they have enough and they rise up and they take back their own liberty and ownership and appoint new leaders. And that's been happening not on a massive war scale, but in social settings constantly. If there's a boss that you don't respect, that boss leaves, or all the people leave, and a new hierarchy gets created. Unless the boss has extreme power and is an extreme tyrant that you can't even try and overthrow. But in that scenario, people tend to just quit and find a new job. And that's what you should be doing. And that's often the case. So I don't think it's helpful, useful, or even healthy to be using terms like alpha and beta as absolutes, as opposed to using them as a rough description of certain behaviors.
Okay, that makes sense. Could you not simplify it down then to, let's say, higher status and low status people?
Absolutely. And when I write and when I talk about my books and when I've done my speaking events and with my private clients, that is what I do. Because the issue is, if you're saying somebody's the alpha, that means they are the top of the pyramid. There's no competition there. If I say somebody's high status, there is room for you to be high status, for me to be high status, for 20 million other people to be high status. There's room for all of us. The issue with alpha is it makes it competitive because it's singular. It is a zero-sum game where one person has to be alpha. That means nobody else can be. And I think that's bollocks. The truth is, every human being can be confident, and that doesn't take away my ability to be confident. Every time I coach people out there, men or women, in how to become more confident, how to become more emotionally stable, how to be more self-assured, and all these other little things that I help with in terms of their mindset and their attractiveness, I don't lose the skill myself. I still have that skill. I've just helped other people and given value, and it's great. It's not like I'm giving them my money, because in that scenario, I'm losing value, they're gaining value. That's not what's happening. I'm teaching them a skill, and we're both gaining value, we're both becoming higher status, and that's brilliant. And that's exactly what I'm trying to achieve.
Okay, so yeah, that kind of makes a lot of sense. And to me personally, it makes a lot of sense to talk in terms of high status, low status. And just because you help somebody else, it doesn't mean that you're putting yourself down, because you have mutual benefit. But I know from speaking to people myself, and I know that you've had this before in your private coaching and in your public speeches and stuff. Could you not argue that having that alpha competition is actually positive for society? And if you have the higher status as a sort of general broad spectrum, just no kind of hierarchy within it, it kind of allows for complacency, whereas that alpha hierarchy just clearly says, like, you need to keep striving to be the best. Would that not be better for society overall?
Okay, I think I see what you mean. But I want to be clear. I'm not saying that we should get rid of hierarchies. I'm not saying we should make it kind of just, I don't what is it? Binary, is it, when there's only two options? Is that binary?
Yeah, binary.
So I'm not saying we should make it binary where you can be high status, low status. I'm still saying we keep the entire spectrum of the most low status person you know in any hierarchy to the highest status person in any hierarchy. I absolutely am all for that. I think hierarchies are, first of all, they're unstoppable. They're naturally occurring. There's nothing you can do about them. They're inevitable. But not only that, I think they're incredibly useful. Because I want, for example, if my mother needed heart surgery, I want to know who the highest ranked, the highest of them out there in the world, who is the top heart surgeon, so I can go get that person to operate on my mother. And I want to know who the worst surgeon is, so I can tell them to get the fuck away from my mother. Like, I think hierarchy is an amazingly important, brilliant thing. My issue is more in terms of your own personal self-help and your own personal self-health. Self-health. I don't want you constantly being tied emotionally and egotistically and in terms of your positive and negative emotions to your dopamine, your serotonin, your cortisol. I don't want that tied to whether you are the alpha or the beta of the group. I want it instead to be, I am a high status person. Those can be your positive affirmations in the morning if you do them. But they can be the bedrock of self-confidence, which is, I do give value. I do make decisions. I am assertive. I am... all these kind of high status traits. I have all of these. However, accepting that you're not the top of every hierarchy, because you can't be, no one is, but instead working every day to improve yourself to become higher up and become better in these hierarchies. So I think there is a way to not use the term alpha and beta and instead use terms like higher status, low status, higher status, highest status, high status, low status, and use all these differentiations of term. That's even better, because, for example, you and I have both know somebody who, I think you and I will do it off camera, but if you and I were to discuss who we think is the highest status person that you and I have ever met, we'd probably agree. In fact, we'd definitely agree. I'd bet money on it. Equally, if you and I were to talk about the lowest status person we've ever met, we'd also agree. And that's because this isn't something that is arbitrarily made up by a society. This is something that's been going on in our brain through evolution for at least 300 million years. Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life, Antidote to Chaos. The first chapter, he talks about lobsters and the dopamine system, the serotonin system. And he talks about all this. And it's a case of we have a ticker in the back of our head that is literally counting, this person is higher than me, this person's lower than me. And this hierarchy there's nothing we can do about it. It's inevitable. It's a biological fact. It exists, and it's biology. Unless you're going to go and have some extreme brain surgeries, which I'm pretty sure would kill you, you can't get rid of it. So my question is, how can you frame it in a way that's positive to you and not frame it in a way that I think is self-destructive? And I think this kind of idea of always having to be alpha, I think that's destructive, because you're going to meet certain people who are just ahead of you in the self-development game. If I met Dwayne Johnson, as confident as I am, as all these kind of traits that I've learned and built over the last few years, chances are Dwayne Johnson is going to have way more social proof. In fact, he definitely will. He's taller than me, larger than me, stronger than me, older than me, richer than me, more charismatic. I'd admit he's a better looking guy than I am as well. So he's got all these different factors that make him probably slightly more higher status than I am. Now, if I'm looking at it from a occasion of he's higher status than me, but I'm still high status, that doesn't affect my ego too much, because that's great, because it goes, well, I can develop it. Because you can look at what Dwayne Johnson used to be in interviews, and he was a lot more shy and kind of not very particularly charismatic, versus how he is now. You can realize it's a learnable skill, and I can keep going and developing and becoming more and more and more charismatic, more confident. I can go to the gym and become more impressive physically, etc. I can go and become even healthier and all these other things. I can achieve and make more money, give more value to the world, etc. But if it's a case of you're using the label of alpha, it's, well, I can't be alpha until I can surpass Dwayne Johnson. Well, I'm sorry, but as someone who's 5'10", 195, looking at Dwayne Johnson, who let's assume is 6'6", 250, that's a tough order, given that the man has an 8-inch height advantage just to begin with. And I'm not saying size is the only factor in being alpha before you wankers comment and go, oh, this is what he said. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it is a factor. If you don't think it's a factor, then you're a fucking moron. Obviously, height, physical size, your looks, they do have a factor on how you're seen in society. They don't have they're not the only factor. You can cheat and not be good physically, not be particularly tall, and not have great bone structure, and just have such an amazing social circle, have such amazing charisma and confidence, and give such amazing value, be really funny, entertaining, be with these perfectly lovely people to be around from a personality standpoint. And you can do far, far better than the good-looking six whatever person who's jacked with the Greek god abs, who's got a terrible personality. You will definitely beat them. But having that, so there are certain genetic advantages some people have. And I think trying to be cool, trying to make yourself the alpha in any situation makes it a zero-sum game, and you're going to lose some of them, and that's going to destroy your ego. And even if you win, the other person might be playing the same game, and now they've lost and they're worse off emotionally. And that's not what you want. We want everybody to be positive and emotionally in a good place, because otherwise they're no fun, and otherwise it affects other people. So the best way to make people around you positive, as well as you yourself being positive, is to refrain from these kind of zero-sum games, and instead looking at it as, if I become higher status than you, that's great, because I've become higher status, and you've now got an example that this person can learn from in me to become high status themselves. And equally, if I meet somebody who's higher status than me, instead of me going, for fuck's sake, I really wanted to be the alpha, fuck's sake, and getting really angry and beating yourself up about it, you can go, oh, this person's higher status than me. Right, what are they doing? What is it about their eye contact that I don't have? What is it about their tonality that I can emulate? How do they stand? Is it maybe they're just leaning forward a bit more, or are they a bit more relaxed, leaning back, relaxed in the conversation? You can identify these things and learn from them and adapt and improve and become higher status. And it's a never-ending quest. And I think that's beautiful and brilliant. Whereas the quest ends at alpha. If you are the alpha, then it's great, you're alpha. You can't become alpha. You can't become the super alpha. You're the top. There's no room to grow. Whereas if you're the highest status person you know, you can still keep going. You find a new social circle. You can do whatever. Even if you don't find a new social circle, you can still work on becoming better and better. And you still have motivation to do so, because you haven't called yourself highest status. You've called yourself high status, and you can become higher. So I think, I don't think that there's an issue with hierarchies whatsoever. I think hierarchies are a brilliant thing, and we owe pretty much everything we've ever invented and everything we enjoy and everything in the world, my own existence and all of our existences, I'm pretty sure we owe that all to hierarchies. However, there's a right way and a wrong way to use a hierarchy from an emotional and a psychological standpoint, and I think far too many people are using it negatively.
Talking from the personal kind of standpoint on that, then, you obviously said that alpha, beta, and sort of attaching yourself to those definitions can have a negative psychological impact on you. And I completely agree. I think it'd be better for you personally to go down the route of higher status, lower status. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the reason why that may be is because alpha and beta and terms like that are almost who you are. They're personality traits. They're the type of person you are. They're like extroversion and introversion. It's who you are as a person. So if you think you're alpha and then go into a setting where you're actually a beta, your vision of yourself and who you think you are, and then breaks down that personality. Whereas using terms like higher status simply kind of detaches it from who you are as a person, and therefore it's more of a, like, having status and becoming higher status is a skill rather than a set personality trait of who you are. Do you agree with that? Or
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd rephrase it ever so slightly, but I agree with what you're saying. So the way I would phrase it is, if you have this emotional attachment to being called the alpha or to being seen as the alpha, and you go into a room and you're clearly not the alpha, I don't think it's a case of, I think you phrased it really accurately, which is you kind of get emotionally distraught because your own self-image is now destroyed and ripped apart and it's completely gone. And that's because it's not a question of you've attached your ego to certain traits, because you might still have those alpha traits. You might still be confident and assertive and loud and all these things, but this person might just be more so. or they might have more social proofing, or whatever it may be. They may just be older and command more respect. There could be 1,000 reasons for it. So you don't necessarily, it's not the personality traits, it's the fact you have made an emotional bond and psychological bond to being alpha. So it's your position in the hierarchy. Whereas calling yourself higher status, that is not a place in the hierarchy. You haven't said, I'm the top, I'm the middle, the bottom. You've just said, I'm higher. So I'm above average. I'm everywhere from 51% upwards. Yeah, I'm from 51% upwards. I'm part of the higher group. So I'm above average. Okay, well, if you meet somebody then who is the 1% right at the top, the 1 percentile, that doesn't change the fact that you've identified as higher status, because you still are higher status than everybody else on the planet comparatively. The question is, how are you comparing yourself? So if I build my emotional resiliency saying that I am the alpha on my football pitch when I play with my mates, because my mates are all terrible. Not true. I'm definitely the lowest status person when I play football with my mates. But let's say, for example, I am. If that's what I'm tying it to, then that's fine, because when I go to the pub, if I meet somebody who's more alpha than me, it makes no difference because my link is specifically to the football. But it doesn't give me any benefit if there's nobody there that is alpha, because I haven't got any emotional link towards the pub. And equally, it means if a new guy joins the team and this person then kind of assumes the role as alpha, it totally destroys the kind of emotional rock and the anchor you've put in place. Whereas again, like you were saying, if you use the terms higher status, it's just so much better, just because it's a question of there can be multiple high status people. In fact, you should probably want your social circle to be high status people, because it kind of, they all push you forward. They can help motivate you. You can learn from them and improve by just watching their behavior, and their positive mindsets are going to affect you and all these kind of things. So yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. There's a zero-sum game attached to the absolutes, which is alpha and beta and omega, whereas there's a gray area. It's more of a spectrum when you talk about high status and low status. And I think living in a spectrum makes more sense from a social standpoint, given that it is a spectrum. You'll be up, down, left, and right, changing every 20 minutes depending on who you meet and who you're around.
So it's kind of moving away from putting people in boxes, because at the end of the day, that's what using terms like alpha beta is. It's putting people in boxes so you can understand them almost, whereas in reality, it's like you just said, it's more of a spectrum, more of a gradient, varying degrees of truth.
Yeah, absolutely. My mother, when she was she has a master's in psychology, and whenever we obviously talk about psychology quite a lot, given it's a shared interest of ours. And what was interesting is she was talking about her master's, and she basically said psychology degree, an undergraduate, teaches you these are the pigeonholes that we put people into. So you've got psychopathy and sociopathy and ADHD, and you've got this and this and this. You've got introverts, you've got extroverts, and you get given all these archetypes and these pigeonholes in which to put people into. When you do your master's in psychology, what they basically turn around and say is, you know, all those pigeonholes, you've got all these boxes to put people into, right? Break them all up. They don't exist, because nobody is a perfect example of any of these things. People are always a blend of everything. So to use the most kind of commonly misused one, extroverts and introverts. People all the time say to me, oh, I can't do that, Harry, because I'm introverted. Or, oh, mate, I'll be brilliant at that. I'm extroverted. And it's like, first of all, you're not a perfect introvert and you're not a perfect extrovert. Everybody is, say the spectrum is 100 to 0, and 100 means you are the perfect extrovert and 0 means you're the perfect introvert. Nobody is a 0. Nobody is 100. Most people are probably in like 30 to 70 category. I've done that math right? Yeah, 30 to 70. Most people are within that kind of that bandwidth in the middle. And there'll be some people who are maybe, I don't know, a 90 over here, or like a 10 down here, who are going to be extreme on one side. But they're incredibly rare. The vast majority of people, the standard deviation, they fall in the middle. And this is something that really winds me up. It also only works if people understand the actual definitions of the terms they use. So people use introvert, extrovert all the time. I'm curious, because I don't know if we've discussed this before. Do you know what the actual clinical definition of introverted is? Of an introverted person?
my understanding of introverted slash extroverted is, so an introverted person loses energy from social interaction, and then an extrovert subsequently gains energy from social interaction.
Yes, absolutely. So an introverted person, it's not that introverted person means you're shy, or introverted means you have social anxiety. It means that being around people physically drains you. It tires you out. You lose your battery. You can be around people. You can be really loud, really gregarious. You can be the life of the party. You can be a leader as an introvert. But it just means after you spend, say, a couple hours with a group of people, you then need to go have some alone time and read or play guitar or play video games, whatever it might be. And most people are on the spectrum. When I say this now, I want, like, genuinely comment down below. Is there anybody out there who doesn't sometimes go, I need a bit of alone time? Or is there anybody out there who's the opposite, who never ever has the urge to be sociable with anybody else? Like, genuinely let me know in the comments down there, because if so, I'm going to reach out to you and we can have a conversation. Because almost like I said, there's no perfect introvert, no perfect extrovert. We're all at, like, somewhere on this spectrum between, yeah, for the most part, I'm really sociable. I want to meet new people, want to have conversations, I want to go. And they tend to be more on the gregarious nature, more outgoing. But that's not what extroverted means. You can have an introvert who, let's say, for example, can do, say, 3-4 hours of socializing as a big group, like say a party, say university, a freshers party. They can go to one a week for a few hours. But after that, they need like 2 days just chilling in their room by themselves, playing video games, reading, guitar, working on the business, whatever it may be. That person may be introverted, but they can still, when they go to these freshers parties, be the leader of the room. They can be super high status, confident, charming. They can do really well in terms of pulling or networking, making friends, having this massive social circle. They're not mutually exclusive terms. And the reason it kind of winds me up is it's similar to this alpha beta thing we've been talking about, which is like, it's so many clients say, yeah, but I'm a beta, or yeah, but I'm introverted. So that means I can't learn these skills that you're trying to teach. It just goes against my genetics. It's like, no, your genetics tell you that you need to be able to have alone time to chill out after you've been in a social setting. Great. So do that. When you're in the social setting, you can still use these skills. You can still learn to be a leader. You can learn to be assertive. You can learn to be confident, to talk with conviction, to have tonality. You can learn these skills. And I don't think it's mutually exclusive, even remotely. In fact, it's not even a case of I think. I absolutely 100% know that there is no correlation. You can be a super charismatic introvert and you can have no charisma as an extrovert. You and I both know examples of people who fit the scenario. So it's one of those things where the labels are really useful at simplifying things to the masses. But when you're talking about this high level depth, which people try and pretend they understand, they realize that no, you have to rip up all these rule books and pigeonholes because nobody fits all the criteria. It doesn't make sense. We're not binary creatures. We are all completely unique, and we're shaped not just by genetics, but by our environmental exposure, by what we experience in our lives, and by how we interpret and perceive what we experience. And all of that's going to be unique, and all that's going to have unique effects on us. It's why you can have identical twins who have totally different personalities, because if you raise them separately, they will have very different personalities.
Interesting. Just to give some sort of real life examples of what you've just talked about, of people, you specifically said people being super extroverted but having no charisma, and people being super introverted but with lots of charisma. Two examples that jump to mind for me is you've got the extrovert with no charisma, would be that person that comes out, let's say on a night out or to a social setting, and they're just really loud and obnoxious. And that's what, like, you don't like them at the end of that kind of setting, but they have energy throughout the night. That's kind of what I think of. Correct me if these examples are incorrect in any way, but that is what I think of. And then the super introverted, kind of really charismatic person would then be that person that only comes out to those social settings, let's say once a month. But when he does, he charms everybody, and you really like him and you want him or her to come out more, but they just don't want to because they get drained from those interactions.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect description. So to give some like visual descriptions for people, if you think of the extrovert with no social skills, have you seen the In-Betweeners movie, the first one? You know the weirdo. You know the one I mean? That kid who's always trying to talk to him, trying to be their mate, who's like, can I have a beer? You say yes, you say no. Which one is it? Who's in charge? That kind of wanker. He is clearly extroverted because he's trying to be part of a group. He's trying to be social. He's trying to do all these things. But he hasn't got any of the skills to do so, and he just comes across as weird. So that's a really good example of that. In terms of introverted charisma, I would fit that example. Like you've seen, when we go out, I will absolutely be the leader and I'll be the life of the party, and I'll bring people in and I'll introduce new people into the conversation. And I'll take over and I'll be brilliant and extroverted. But how many times do I actually go out doing anything sociable with anybody anymore? Now, partly that's because I'm a new parent and that my son and my fiance take priority. But it's also the case of, but it's also, I'm just fundamentally an introverted person. I have my own interests. I fundamentally prefer my time with a small group of few people, or just one-on-one like you and I do with these podcasts, discussing ideas and working through concepts. I'm not the biggest, I want to be around 150 people, let's go crazy. But when I am in those situations, I know exactly how to turn the switch on. I know how to become charismatic, and it's all automatic for me now. But I've had to learn all those things because that wasn't me by base. Anyone who doesn't understand what I'm talking about, go back to the first video Jordan and I did together, the origin stories, and you'll see that I've very much shifted in how I am and who I was over the last kind of 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm almost actually the not complete opposite, but I'm almost the opposite of what you've just described. So you've kind of said that you're generally more introverted, but you kind of know when to switch it on for social scenarios. Well, I'm actually the opposite. So in social scenarios, I spend most of my days on the phone to prospective clients or actual clients or friends or family. I finish my days with more energy than when I started. That said, after a week or even a couple of weeks of me being on calls every single day, I do then need a day to myself. So I completely understand what you're saying about I am not an extrovert. I am more
Just so you're aware, that cut out then. So I missed kind of the last, I'm assuming 10 seconds of what you said.
Okay, no problem. I'll just restart from the top and you can just cut it. Yes, so I completely understand what you're talking about. I'm actually almost the complete opposite of what you've just described. So you sort of said that generally speaking, you like to be alone one-on-one and you kind of like your alone time, but then
the camera's frozen facing me. So just give me a second for it to kind of get back to live. Okay, it's back to live. So do you mind going from the top again for me? Sorry.
It's cool. Okay, yeah, so just cut it, obviously, and I'll restart in 1 second. Okay, yeah, so I know exactly what you're talking about. So
all right, go.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm almost the exact opposite of what you've just described. So you just kind of said you're mostly introverted, but when you're in a social setting, you know how to switch on that extroversion switch, for lack of a better term. Well, I'm actually the opposite to that. So I spend most of my days on calls, either with clients, prospective clients, friends, family, that sort of thing, or of course a podcast. And I finish my days really, really high energy. Like I get energized as the conversation goes. A week or even 2 weeks where I'm talking to people all the time and I'm in a social setting, at least most of the time. At the end of that week, I then am at a point where I kind of just want to either read a book for a bit or go on games for a bit and just kind of game on my own for a bit and kind of go down that route. So I completely get what you're saying. It's not I am an extrovert, it's I am mostly extroverted, but I do have those introverted tendencies, just like you are mostly introverted with those extroverted tendencies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also, and something I want to be clear here as well, because I have a lot of clients say to me they're introverted, etc. as well. There is a difference between physically losing energy when you are around, when you're in a social situation around other people, and it physically draining you, versus the activity that you're doing drains you. So just be aware of that. Like there are certain things, there's a significant difference in my eyes between being, I'm introverted in the sense of when there's a get together, regardless of what they're doing, unless I'm in the mood to go, I'm not going to go. Versus there's a get together and they all want to go play football and I'm not in the mood to play football, so I don't want to go. Whereas if they'd said, let's all go to the pub and talk about psychology and politics and history for the next 3 hours, I'd be like, yeah, I'm definitely in the mood for that. So just be aware that there is a difference between not wanting to do something because it's social and not wanting to do something because the activity associated with it. In the same way that you can be extroverted, but not like clubbing. You can be extroverted, but not enjoy sports. Like there's other ways and there's other opportunities to explore this. So quite often I find people who say, oh, I'm really introverted because I never want to go out with my mates. I never want to go clubbing. It's just not for me, yada, yada. And I talk to them for like 10 minutes and it's like, you are clearly extroverted because you are just every second when a person walks past without even thinking, turning to them and going, hey, how you doing? And it's like saying hi to people on the street and looking people in the eyes and smiling and everything. So you're super extroverted. What you haven't done though is found the activity that you enjoy doing whilst being sociable. You don't like nightclubs and bars. Fair enough. There's a million other things you could go try. And my rough rule of life, and I think the same applies to me and Jordan here, which is until you turn 30, you do not know what you like. You do not know what you might know what you dislike to an extent, but you really don't have much of a clue. So spend your 20s and spend your teenage years just trying everything that comes your way. Give foot golf a go, give badminton a go play squash, play snooker, go to an escape room, go to the cinema, watch a French movie with the subtitles on, go watch silent cinema in black and white, go to a poetry reading, go take part in a debate, like just try shit out. One of the channels, one of the only other channels I recommend in terms of charisma and mindset is Charisma on Command. And in that, Charlie talks about how he learned salsa lessons because it was just offered to him and he was like, I guess, didn't really want to do it, did it, and turns out it's one of his passions now. Like that absolutely applies. You only really know if you like something or not by doing it. So go out and just kind of say yes to lots of things, give it 2-3 attempts. If it doesn't work and you don't enjoy it, that's the end. You can say you've tried. But when you're 20, we have lots of people have all these ideas in their head of what it is, who they are already, what it is they like, what it is they don't like, and all these kind of different things. You really don't. And until you've gone out and tried things that you go, I probably don't like that. Until you've actually found out for definite that you don't like it, you don't know. And it may be that you've spent all this time thinking that you're introverted, when in reality, you just haven't found the right opportunities to allow yourself to be extroverted. And vice versa. You might think that you're super, super extroverted, but in reality, you go, you know what? I just tried doing a jigsaw by myself or a Sudoku, and I loved it so much. And you might find out that spending that bit of time alone, instead of being in a bar or a club with friends or whatever it might be even better and healthier and happier for you. So you need to go and experiment with these things because at the end of the day, none of us are pure introverts or pure extroverts. So there's going to be that balance, and everybody's going to have that balancing point at different places, like Jordan mentioned, with him and I being kind of almost opposites in that sense. So you need to go and experiment with these things. And I think that's huge. Like, please drop in the comments below, actually, something random that you thought you were going to hate, but turns out you love doing. I want to hear kind of a list from you guys.
Yeah, that's really interesting to see, actually. So it's almost like you've got to separate your interests from whether or not you're introverted or extroverted. So it's a case of, do you enjoy your interests with people or without people, is almost the way I've understood that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are certain things that are almost definitely going to be sociable versus non-sociable. So if you're going to a nightclub, that is more of a social activity. However, you can go to a nightclub, and I know people who have done this from my days when I was a club promoter, who go to a nightclub by themselves, have a few drinks by themselves, don't really talk to anybody, and just love the music and just chill at the back of the club and just listen to the tunes. That's absolutely fine. If that's what you enjoy, do it. Good on you. All the best. There are people I know who are big sports fans but don't like talking, and they're not particularly sociable. So they'll go watch their team play rugby. They'll go watch Leicester Tigers, for example. It's actually Wasps, I think, in their case. They'll go watch the Wasps game. They will not have a single word with any other human being there, even though we see it's this sociable thing. And it's entirely up to that. At the end of the day, there's a million ways of doing anything. Now, some are going to be better than others depending on the situation, but go out and do shit, random shit. You should set yourself a goal like me and Jordan are going to be doing after kind of lockdowns and COVID is over, where he doesn't even know about this yet. So you're going to get his live reaction. We're going to have to do a 2-week period where he is required to say yes to every opportunity that comes his way that doesn't financially destroy him or morally abhorrent to him. So it means if somebody messages him at 3 a.m. and goes, Jordan, come on, let's go to the park and play foot golf, he has to say yes. And the sim's going to apply to me. And the point of it is exactly that, which is we are going to discover something that right now, he and I would both say, no interest, not going to do it. And at the end of those 2 weeks, we're going to have the pod and we'll be able to say, right, so I've done my 2 weeks. Turns out I really, really like woodworking, or I really, really enjoy plastering. Who knows? It could be anything. And that's kind of the point.
That sounds interesting. I do like that idea. I'm not going to lie, and I have read of people doing that before. The thing I'm really concerned about is that you're going to know that I'm doing that, and you're going to take the piss.
I love how you say take the piss. All I'm saying is going to be like bare knuckle boxing one day, a circus act with a live bear the next, fire eating day 3. Just lots of like crazy shit, yeah. I'm going to send you on a parachute jump.
That'll be a hell of a week. That'll be a hell of a week.
Yeah, send you on a parachute jump.
I always wanted to do that, to be honest, but...
Fair enough.
With no parachute.
Anyway, we'll record, we'll get GoPros, and we'll just jump out of planes going, yeah, fuck it. We said we would. But yeah, it's kind of one of those things where I just wanted to get this very cleared up in terms of off my chest. It's really pissing me off. Kind of detach yourself from all these labels you have about you, whether it's alpha, whether it's beta, whether it's introverted, extroverted. The truth is, it really doesn't matter. The truth is, you aren't either of any of those things. You are somewhere in between, most likely. And it's just not really useful you paying attention, because at the end of the day, your brain is paying attention for you. Your brain is clocking and checking whether you are higher status or lower status than somebody else, and it's physically affecting your mood. Your serotonin levels and your cortisol levels, they do literally affect how you stand. They affect how far back your shoulders go. They affect whether you look up and expose your neck or whether you're constantly looking down like this. They affect how loud you are, how much you move your hands. They affect all these things. And even if you don't care about any of that stuff, it physically affects your health. The higher your cortisol level, the more likely which is usually caused by stress and low down in the dominance hierarchy or the social hierarchy, being a low status person, you are more likely to get ill. You're more likely to die from certain illnesses, and you're more likely to suffer from things like depression and heart disease. So even if you're not doing it because you want to get a new girlfriend or a new wife or a new husband, even if you're not doing it because you want to get promotion at work, or even if you're totally happy with your life and your social setting and your circumstances, your network and everything is going great for you, pay attention to your mindset, just because we do know that your brain controls your body. And if your brain is ill, it's going to make your body ill and you're going to suffer as a result.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense then. Just one of my last few questions anyway. In terms of organizations that have predefined hierarchies. So let's use a business as an example. You have all of the C positions. You have CEO, CFO, COO, CIO, and then obviously you kind of go down. You've got the middle managers and then the employees.
Yeah.
Does being a CEO automatically define you as alpha, or in the terms we're going to use, the highest status? Because theoretically they should be, because they're the top of that hierarchy. But does that mean they necessarily are?
It depends on who's in the room. So if, for example, let's say it's, what's a company that's kind of clear? Let's say Coca-Cola. Yeah. You have the CEO of Coca-Cola, and he's stood on the factory floor with the workers who physically are involved in the manufacturing of the drink. Yeah. So you've got the mechanics who are making sure the machines are working efficiently, and then you've got the really, really hard-working people who are there on the factory floor, physically moving the stock around and lining up new bottles, etc. I'm assuming a lot of it's going to be automated for Coca-Cola, but let's say it's not. Will that person be the highest status person compared to these factory workers? Probably. In 99.9999999% of the time, yes, they will be. However, if you took that same CEO and put them in a board meeting, and now you've got the chairman of the board there, no, because the chairman of the board potentially, and this will vary again, it's all very much depends on who these people are. How the chairman of the board could potentially have more power and more social influence than the CEO, which could mean that he is perceived as having the highest status. If somebody like, say, Warren Buffett was in the room, who is an investor in Coca-Cola and a significant shareholder, I believe. I don't know for definite, but I believe he owns a solid percentage, but not the majority. I assume he would be incredibly high status in that room, or he certainly would be incredibly high status in that room, because not only has he got the high status of he owns a certain percentage of the company and he's probably on the board of directors, but on top of that, he has so much social value outside of this hierarchy of Coca-Cola. He just has international name recognition. He's one of the most famous billionaires on the planet, one of the most successful investors, certainly of the last 100 years or so. An incredibly famous man. So he will have a huge amount of high status attached to kind of his fame and attached to kind of this world-renowned competency and expertise that he either deservedly or doesn't undeservedly has. I'm willing to assume he's a very, very intelligent guy, and he's an incredibly smart man from everything I've seen. But whether he deserves that higher status or not is up for debate. Maybe the CEO of Coca-Cola is just so much more competent, more charismatic, better in every way than him, but this fame outmatches it. I don't know. So it depends on the specific people. But as a rough rule of thumb, when you will not get to levels of kind of C-suite, unless there's kind of nepotism or some kind of corruption going on, without being confident and emotionally stable, stress resistant, and having these kind of assets that we attribute to being higher status. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, so the predefined hierarchy is just one factor that can either determine or give an indicator to somebody's status, and not just categorically, if you're CEO, you're the highest status.
If you're a CEO, I would pretty much guarantee you are high status.
Not
without, yeah, to talk about who's the highest status, you'd have to know the specific individuals.
Yeah.
But as a rough rule of thumb, it would be fair to assume that a CEO is going to have more characteristics of a higher status human being or higher status male than a middle management employee, or than somebody who's on their first day as an intern or on the factory floor. Now, that's not to say that that's not mobile and that people can't become higher status and overtake. They absolutely can. But the assumption would be that based on the time period they've been involved in the hierarchy, that the member of C-suite has shown consistently enough high status to get them moved up into that position.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, in that case then, I've kind of got one last question that is actually relating to what we've talked about, and also a study that I read probably like a year ago at this point actually. And that is that people, whether it's men or women, who are generally the decision makers in their company. So let's use
Mhm.
alpha or the higher status people in their company, their place of work, whatever it might
Yeah,
be.
the leader.
The leader, generally speaking, like obviously there are plenty of exceptions, but as a correlation, they tend to be more. They take more of a submissive role in at home, and then they kind of don't want to make decisions at home. Why do you think that is?
Okay, so I'm just going to reiterate just because the connection wasn't perfect. So just making sure I understand your question. Are you asking why is it that quite often we see that somebody who spends their work life making all the decisions in their home lives don't want to? Is that roughly the question?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So essentially, the reason for it is the same reason why lots of people don't want to be the decision maker in the first place. And that's every decision you make is a consequence or has consequences. If you're at work and you're making high pressure decisions all day that could theoretically bankrupt the company and cost 10,000 people their jobs, or there's a $2 million contract or a £5 million government contract on the line or whatever it might be, if you're making all those kind of decisions at work, that's so much stress and that's so much kind of thick skinness you've had to build up and resilience to be able to handle all those kind of pressure situations, that the last thing you want to do when you come home is a repeat of constant high pressure situations. People want to be able to kind of differentiate their lives and go, right, this is my work life. Work life is stressful, but rewarding and worth it. Home life is peaceful and I don't have to be switched on. I don't have to be constantly fighting to get my way, to get my point across, to get my way. I can just kind of relax and it's stable. And it's that almost kind of yin yang approach of that the Yaoists point out, which is there's this balance and this balancing act, which is if you're super assertive, there will be times you want to be able to switch off and not need to be assertive. And vice versa. There'll be, if you're super submissive at work, and you're constantly told what to do, chances are there'll be some avenue you look to try and gain dominance in some way. And you often see that happens quite often. And I'm not making this comparison for anybody who takes this the wrong way. But when you look at abusive relationships, one thing you can often see is the abuser, the person who is being controlling and powerful and taking that far too far and being abusive. They often feel out of control in their own lives. So they're trying to, or felt out of control in their personal lives at an earlier point through trauma or maybe their own abuse or whatever it may be. And they're trying to assert control now so they have something in their life that they do have control over as kind of a steadying anchor point because they feel their entire life is in chaos.
Would there be people that exist that want to take control and be the decision maker in every element of their life, and vice
Yes.
versa?
Yes. You and I know one. You and I know, we'll talk about it off air because I'm not going to name and shame him. But you and I know somebody who they will fundamentally say, I want to make 99.999% of the decisions that go on around me. And that tiny percentage they don't, it's because they just don't give a flying fuck about it. And that's quite often the case. Because there is a difference between somebody saying, look, I'm not making a decision because I don't care, versus somebody who goes, look, I'm just burnt out. Please, like you decide. I just don't want to make the decision. I don't care. Just please. There's a difference between that. One of them is kind of almost like a tyrannical, almost arrogance of why would you even bring this decision to me? That's beneath me to even talk about. Why would I waste my time thinking about what color should we paint the walls, for example? I don't know. That there are people who have that extreme, hyper competitive, hyper, I want to be the alpha, hyper, I need to be the highest status person. And those people tend to be extreme about, I'll make every decision. I'll take charge in every situation. I'll be right at the fighting at the top for everything. Those people do exist for certainty. Yeah. And the vice versa exists. There are people out there who want to make no decisions.
Okay, interesting then. Okay, cool. Well, that's kind of everything for my questions. So just to summarize what you've kind of talked about, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but essentially we should try and move away from the kind of absolute terms of alpha, beta, gamma, sigma, all that sort of crap, and instead move towards more of a scale or spectrum in terms of status that you can kind of use to not only place yourself in a hierarchy, but also to learn and improve and grow and move further up that scale.
Yeah, essentially. I'm just trying to make this incredibly clear, so I'm going to hammer it home once again. The idea of having an alpha male does not exist in the way that we use it to describe other mammals that it does in humans. Our societies are laid out, our hierarchies are laid out so differently that you can't use it as a comparative term. When in social science we use terms like alpha, or if I'm coaching, or if you've seen in my videos, or if me and Jordan talk and in the future we use the term alpha. When I say alpha, I do not mean this person is the alpha. What instead I mean is this person is displaying traits that make it likely they will be alpha in the majority of the hierarchies they are in. And it is subtly different, but it's so important that people understand this, which is if I describe Zac Efron as an alpha, for example, when he is on set filming a movie with, let's say, who's a famous director? Spielberg, then he's not going to be the alpha. Spielberg is in charge. Spielberg's movie, he decides what goes. If you look at, on that film project again, you're going to have certain producers who have funded the movie who are going to have a lot more of a say. And it's going to be one of these things of, depending on who specifically is there, the role might change. So it might not be the director for this movie because this director might be more insecure. The actor may have more, maybe higher status, and they may be the alpha here. You might have a producer that's even more powerful, and etc. So the point I'm trying to make is human dynamics are too complicated to simplify down to alpha, beta, omega, delta, gamma, sigma, zeta. It's too complicated. So instead, we're using a shorthand. So when I say this person is alpha, I do not mean they are an alpha male. I mean they display certain traits that universally accepted to be traits that alpha males predominantly have, i.e. confidence, emotional stability, the willingness to make decisions, assertiveness, values that they hold themselves and other people to. I mean those 5 things. Now those 5 things are prerequisites for being higher status. Of course they are, because high status and alpha are basically the same thing, and lower status and beta, or lower status and delta, are basically the same things. The difference is one actually works in a human society, that's higher status, lower status, and the terms like alpha, beta, delta don't actually apply correctly to human society in the way that we use them when describing the animal kingdom.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for just sort of summarising and clarifying that then. Do you have anything else that you want to sort of mention, talk about, rant about?
One quick one, which is we have an upcoming podcast on veganism coming up. It's going to be very non-aggressive. Before you assume, it's not going to be confrontational. It's going to be very much a case of just kind of discussing ideas and kind of quite like an epistemological take on it, where we're just going to kind of discuss ideas and see kind of where everyone's coming from. Do you have any specific opinions on this? Do you have any specific questions? If you do, please feel free to either drop a comment down below on the YouTube, or find something from one of our links in the descriptions, message us either on LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. Send us in your questions or your thoughts, because I'd really like to hear a lot more from you guys. I know we're getting a fair bit of interaction from you, a lot more so Jordan, who checks our email, etc. But I'd like to hear a bit more from you guys, other than the ones who just message me going, how much? And like you just immediately jump in for private coaching. So I'd like to hear a lot more about what's your feedback on the podcast. Tell me where you guys find me from as well. On Instagram, send me a message. Are you listening to us on Spotify or on Apple Podcast? Are you watching the YouTubes? Let me know. That's all I want to say. I just want to find out more from these guys. What content are they enjoying? Which videos do they like the most? And kind of which direction do they want us taking this in?
Yeah, for sure. Like you say, we're getting so much interaction from you guys. It's ridiculous. I struggle to keep up with it sometimes. And yeah, it's just a case of these are the things that we want to be hearing. You know, we receive so much fantastic feedback from a lot of you anyway, but you know, these are the things that are really going to help us make the next episode that much better, because we're going to know exactly what it is you want to see, exactly what you did or even didn't like, and we can kind of move forward from there. So yeah, just like Harry said, drop it in the comments, send us an email, send us a DM, however you prefer, and kind of just, yeah, let us know. So if that's everything from you, Harry.
Yeah. Oh, one last thing, actually, no, quickly, sorry. And if there's any guests you guys want us to
No
have,
worries.
like if you guys have ideas
Yeah.
for guests you think you want us to have on or you'd like to see us have a conversation with, even if it's, say, you want to see us debate Joe Rogan on a specific topic about marijuana or something, I have no idea. But if you guys have specific ideas that you want us to talk about or specific guests you want us to have on, again, send us those in the email or DM us or whatever it may be. Like, we'll see what we can do.
Right, so thank you guys so much for watching this episode of the Regal Podcast. I've been Jordan Lewis and this has been Harry Cutress. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, make sure you leave a like down on either this podcast or this video. And don't forget to leave in the comments below what you want to see in future episodes, and more specifically, what you want to see in the upcoming veganism podcast. So thank you again, guys, for watching. It's been a pleasure.